and welcome to What Goes Around. And fabulously, my name is Eamon Murtagh.
And marvellously, my name is Deb Grant.
And in this week's show, the marvellous Deb Grant is back on the game. Oh no, not on the game.
You have to leave that in.
I mean, she's in the dating game. Apologies.
Oh, as if this podcast hadn't tanked my reputation enough. Is that all you want to say about that?
I think I'll just leave it there.
All right, we'll leave it there, listeners. Hopefully that will keep you listening. Anyway, aside from that, Eamon has discovered this newfangled technology called audiobooks, a whole new way to ingest information about music. Perhaps you've heard of them. If not, Eamon is going to enlighten you.
I've seen the future and it's book-shaped. Well, anyway, the main point of this show is that this week our guest is absolutely amazing. He has sold more records than you have ever imagined, and I imagine that's quite a lot. The fabulous Trevor Horn is with us, the producer of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, the lead singer in the Buggles, and occasionally Yes, the man who made Grace Jones's golden period come to life, the man who made Seal a multi-platinum selling star around the world. I mean, he even made a record with Leicester City Football Club. The man's invincible. Trevor Horn is our guest.
We've outdone ourselves this week, I think.
I think we better pod really hard.
I think we better.
Let's get podding.
Let's do it.
DJ Deb. I nearly called you Deb Frankenstein. It's been a while. DJ Deb Grant. Please tell me what goes around in your wonderful world.
Yeah, it'll be a long while yet before I shake off the Frankenstein. I don't want to shake it off, actually.
Your monstrous past will always haunt you.
Speaking of which, I have big news.
Personal
news.
Oh.
I'm recently single, as you may know. After 6 years, I'm back single again, and feel pretty good about it. And but it's an interesting one. It's been 6 years. I feel like a completely different person to who I was 6 years ago. And I'm pretty. How can I describe this tactfully? I'm quite a forceful character when I'm out in social situations. I was out I went to see Hot Chip on Saturday night, and attempted to chat up some guy in a Bad Brains t-shirt, and then it turned out he was like in his mid-20s. But this is it. Like, I think my goggles have been frozen. Am I a cougar now?
I think you must be a cougar if you've gone after a 20-year-old. Then yeah,
Me too. It was dark.
Don't think that'll hold up in court, love.
He was perfectly legal. But anyway.
Ooh, sorry, hang on. Your chair just collapsed.
Oh,
say that again. So I'm steady now.
Okay. But it's, I'm in a totally different place. And my sister's boyfriend has been saying to me, just get on the apps. It'll be a real ego boost, And I'm like, okay, first of all, I don't think my ego needs boosting. And second of all, he's a tall, handsome Irishman. It's different. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, it's not even about, the awful people who you meet on these apps. It's like, I don't know how I would. How do I write about? What am I supposed to fucking say? I like music. Do you know what I mean? How am I supposed to? How do I can't.
My favourite colour is red.
Yeah, come on.
I think. Well, listen. I do not envy you. As much as it might be fun to go wild and crazy about town, I'm very glad that I found my partner and settled down, as they say, before the invention of dating apps, because I have watched many of my friends go on these dating apps, and just seems like a lot of horror for very little sugar. Do you know what I mean? It seems like, first of all, you're right. I mean, I can imagine if I was doing it now, you have to write something about it, you have to take the photograph, and then you're just setting yourself for people to literally come along and judge you.
Yeah, you're on the fucking shelf at Aldi, they're picking you up and reading the ingredients and being like, no, not for me, I'll pick this one instead. But it's it is I think for people like you and me who are singularly obsessed with one thing, do you know, what am I supposed to say? I like fucking Captain Beefheart and Enya, and if you like those things too, let's talk. And also,
but if you put like Captain Beefheart and Enya on your thing, you're going to get some fucking weird people show up, man. Captain Beefheart fans are not, they're not normal people.
Listen, I don't mind weird. What I mind is like a guy fucking with a photo of himself leaning against a car being like, oh, so you're into music then? Do you like vinyls? I can't be arsed with it. But here's the thing, right? So this Samande film, the Samande documentary, which I participated in, I'm in it very briefly, but it means that I got an invite to the premiere, which is part of the BFI London Film Festival. It's happening. It might have already happened by the time this podcast goes out. But basically, I guess I have a plus one. I don't know who to take to this premiere. Who am I going to take? I want to have it. I feel like that's a nice prospect. But help me, Eamon. Give me your top tip.
I was never very good at this, to be honest. But this is the thing. I couldn't do the dating apps because it's just too high pressure. Oh, sure. You want to just meet people, but then you have to go out and do stuff. That's pressure. Yeah. And then there's work. That can go one of two ways: very good or very bad. And it's hard. It is hard. And I think you're going to have to just find it there. But I think maybe the best thing to do at the moment is to, enjoy it for a bit of silliness at the moment. You're not worry too much about it. Yes,
all
exactly.
I want is this is the thing. Like, I already have a husband, and it's my job, and my job is also my child. So I don't really have any room for anything.
In a way, that makes sense because your job does get you up in the middle of the night and keep you awake for hours and hours. That does make sense.
Yeah, and I don't mind it. But so all I want is a little bit of fun. But that's the thing. It's like, I have this, I have some fun events that I'm going to. And I feel like if I was a man, it would be a lot easier. Do you know what I mean?
Do you think so? Honestly, as a man, I would say no. I would say no.
Only because I feel like I'm sort of, I don't know, like I have a bit of, I don't know, I feel like I'm quite alpha. And men don't like that. But if I was a man,
some
that
do.
would be a good...
Listen, I think what you need to do, as my mum would say, is you need to kiss a lot of frogs.
I don't want to kiss any frog.
I know. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's a double-edged sword. It's going to be the apps is the easiest way. There's no doubt about it.
I'm not doing it. Absolutely not. I'm not doing it. This is
I don't think I'd do it either.
I can't believe as a man who's been with their partner for several decades, you don't have any good advice for me.
There must be lads around, surely. There must be a few. See, in my experience, like when a girl asks you out, or girls ask someone out, they nearly always get a yes. When boys ask girls out, it's quite often a no. That's that. Maybe that's just because I'm a boy and that's my experience. Yeah. But I wasn't a big alpha boy. You see, you're probably more alpha than I am.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
I think it might be true, Eamon.
Yeah, I think it almost certainly is.
Come on, would you crack on to a girl in a woman child in a Bad Brains t-shirt at a gig? I bet you.
To be honest, if I was going to crack onto anyone at a gig, they'd have to be wearing a Bad Brains t-shirt. I think that would probably be the first thing I'd look for. Now, listen, one shot in the dark is not everything. You've had your weekend out. You spun the wheel of fortune. You found a Bad Brains t-shirt. It was just filled by a 20-year-old. Yeah. You need to just go out there and spin it again and see what happens. Because you're a beautiful shining star. And, you have your own internal gravity. And that will draw them towards you, I'm sure.
Just need a date for this premiere.
Okay, listeners. Form an orderly queue. Oh my God! No, don't. We did not mean that. Don't do that, please. That would just be creepy and weird. No, honestly, it'll end in tears. You don't want to do this.
Nobody knows me better than the listeners of this podcast.
All right, it's your funeral. Not that I think little of the beautiful people that listen to us. Listen, you're going to be fine. It's going to happen. I think you just need to remain chilled. And whenever you see someone that half catches your eye, just, give them the old blarney. And you'll be away.
Thanks, Dad.
Honestly, you're going to be grand. The other thing is, because you're a powerful figure, that you probably frighten away some of the more lily-livered people. But that's good, because you'd only get annoyed at them in the long run anyway. Yeah, you need someone who's got a bit pushback. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, basically, you're going to flatten them.
I do need someone to put me in my place. That's exactly what I need.
Your star will find its partner, I'm sure. You're going to be all right. In the meantime, I mean, I wish I was in London. I could be your plus one. I'd love to go, swanking around at the posh hotels and do's what you does get invited to.
I bet you would.
Yeah, but, that's as far as it goes, I'm afraid. Listen, keep the faith. You're going to be fine. There'll be a Captain Beefheart fan out there somewhere who hasn't got strange habits. And you're going to be happy. It'll come.
Maybe I should go on the prog cruise.
That's it. That's how you do it. This is it. Listen, you go on the prog cruise. You've already solved half your problems because you know they're going to be into music. And you know they're going to be like sort of generally sort of creative types. But more brilliant for you, you know they can't run away because they're on a ship. Just corner them.
Eamon Murder, surprise me, what goes around?
Well, the surprise is that I'm not going to talk about a video documentary about music.
No, I don't believe you.
No, it's true. I've expanded my universe, and I've done this by finding another way to take a direct injection of musical trivia into my veins. I have entered into the world of audiobooks and music biography. It's good, man. It's good. So I've basically... I started sniffling about, and then I thought, well, this is good. I don't want anyone who's listening to this podcast to stop listening to this podcast and start listening to music audiobooks.
It's the trouble when you recommend something.
Exactly. You stay with us, guys. Yeah. This is like, after you finish this, while you're waiting for the next show, then you can go listen to some of this stuff. But the great thing is that, A, they're very, very long. So, and B, you can have them on while you're doing other things. Do you know what I mean? So like if you're doing the dishes or playing a computer game or whatever it is, you can just have the audiobook battering away, which when you do the Netflix stuff, you can't really do that. You have to sit there and you are basically a zombie for that time. So
I can't listen to music passively. I have to either be listening or not listening. But I'm sure it's very liberating. I
thought, and I've always got the feeling that you are doing something else when I'm talking to you.
Really? Just concentrating very hard.
Okay. Well, I can hear that. I can hear the cogs and gears creaking around as I speak. No, so I've done a few now. I'll give you a few that I've done. So I did The Fabulous Sylvester, The Legend, The Music, The 70s in San Francisco by Joshua Gamson. As you can imagine, Sylvester's story is incredible because he comes from this quite rough but very religious background. He was gay as gay can be from a very young age, and just by sheer force of personality became this incredible star with incredible talent, but really, really took himself out of the ordinary and made this amazing scene. And there's so much to love about it, where they're talking about the sort of the lifestyle that his little gang that hung around and did all the cross-dressing and through the parties and, started all that kind of miming to songs and all that kind of thing. His story is amazing and I really enjoyed it. But the trouble with it is, and this is the trouble with the audiobooks in general, is that who reads them makes such a big difference. Now, the Sylvester one's quite good, but it's not read by the author. It's read by someone else who maybe puts a little too much in it, like where you kind of get the feeling it's an actor who really would prefer this to be a proper role in a proper film or something. So they're giving it, and they're obviously being held back every now and again. But you can feel they want to do voices and stuff, and they want to go a bit further. So what I've decided is my favourite ones are the ones that are read by the people who wrote them or are directly involved by them. So I've gotten a new order tip, and I got Stephen Morris's Record, Play, Pause, Confessions of a Post-Punk Percussionist, the Joy Division Years. Bloody long titles, these. And that's great because it's all like him in his Macclesfield accent, just being very down to earth and unflashy about the whole affair, and kind of giving the sort of picture of Joy Division which you don't get very often because, people want to imagine Joy Division in black and white, grainy Super 8 film. They want to see long shots of them walking into car parks and that sort of thing. But of course, the reality was they were lads from Manchester, and they were like smashing beer bottles and just generally being idiots. I think he's got a lovely way of describing his own idiocy. He's not pretentious at all. He kind of knows where he comes from. And when he starts talking about how Ian Curtis was going off into learning about Baudelaire and all these incredible philosophers and all that sort of stuff, he's very honest about the fact that him and Hooky were pissing into beer bottles in the rehearsal room and leaving them for other bands to find, So it's a lovely dichotomy, and he tells a marvellous story about trying to score speed and scoring a little star-shaped pill and eating that, thinking it was speed, and then finding out that the 5 points of the star were 5 different microdots.
Yikes.
And he's like, there are many ways you might want to do acid, but I imagine on tour in Berlin while staying in some sort of basically a brothel, that probably isn't going to be the best experience you've ever had. But it's a lovely story. I really enjoyed it, and that got me on a bit of a Manchester tip. So then I went on to From Manchester with Love, The Life and Opinions of Tony Wilson by Paul Morley. And this is great. Paul Morley is a great writer. But you know how he appears on all of those Talking Heads shows? Mm-hmm. He's always one of those guys that goes, oh, yeah, when they did this, of course, it changed the course of music. That's right. And it feels like they've cut to him and they just haven't cut away. So I'm halfway through now. I'm like, oh, God, can we cut to Sean Ryder or someone for 10 minutes and just get a different perspective on this whole thing? But no, I would say audiobooks are actually a rather nice way to get into these things, because if you're not like you and you can multitask, then you can listen on the way into work. You can do the dishes.
I mean, I can walk and listen to something.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. I wouldn't want you to be immobile.
Immobilized by an audiobook. But yes, I like an audiobook. I think weirdly, I find it really hard to sit and read. No, that's not true. I do like a memoir, but like fact books, I find it quite hard to sit and read sometimes. Whereas I find fiction really difficult to listen to on audiobook. So like fact books on audiobook, it's the perfect thing. Yeah,
because I think if you listen to fiction, then again, even more importance is put upon the person reading it. Because then you kind of want them to act a little bit, but then the great thing about a fiction book is that you make it up in your head and it becomes this incredible movie in your imagination. But with fact-based books, you kind of don't want that. And it's nice to hear the actual people involved to it, because when they say it, it doesn't have the extra trappings of performance added onto it all. So very good. Go out and treat yourself to those audiobooks. I'm sure they will bring joy into your life.
What we're gonna do right here is go back.
Way back into time.
That's right.
Name that tune. Get up, everybody. Name that tune.
Our guest today has made an astounding impact on the music industry. He wrote the first song to appear on MTV, the prophetic video Killed the Radio Star. He pioneered the use of the sampler in pop music thanks to his early adoption of the Fairlight Synthesizer, and created the gold standard for 12-inch singles with a blizzard of groundbreaking remixes for The Art of Noise, Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Grace Jones. He's worked with the likes of Yes, Propaganda, Seal, Dollar, ABC, Mike Oldfield, Malcom Mclaren, Mark Almond, and a dizzying array of other household names. We are, of course, talking about the production genius that is Mr. Trevor Horn. Trevor, we're so delighted to have you on the show today. How are you?
Fine, thanks very much.
Oh, man.
I'm a bit sort of, hearing my intro.
Yeah, I know. It's always a weird thing, isn't it, when someone just comes right up to your face and tells you how great you are.
I think that was amazingly succint, given everything else that we could have included in that intro.
Yeah,
to be fair.
Yeah. There was a very long Wikipedia entry.
Yeah. But it's amazing, and we were just talking about your book, which is just released, Adventures in Modern Recording, which is the format of the book. It's like your memoir told in 23 songs, either songs that you were involved with or songs that inspired you. So the theme of the book is very similar to the theme of the podcast and your phonographic memory. So it's kind of perfect. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about the book first before we get into your song selections? Because I'm wondering why you felt like now was the best time to put a memoir out and why this felt like the right format to do it in.
I guess I started it about 10 years ago. I wrote 4 of the chapters. And it was like one of those things, somebody got interested for a minute, and then it sort of died away. And then a couple of years back, these people at Pelican Books just came on really strong. They said they really liked, they saw the 4 chapters, they really liked it, and they wanted me to do a book. And I thought, why not, you know?
Yeah.
It might save me doing loads of interviews. I can just tell people, go and read the book.
Not this one.
Yeah, this is the only one you need. This is the big time here.
Exactly.
It's a great concept because we truly believe in the sort of power of music to take you back to certain times in your life, and sometimes times when you didn't have your camera around, and there are big things going on in the world. And just one little clip of music can take you right back years and years and years and put you right in that frame of mind again. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. When you have to go back through everything and think about it. We were talking about the writing of the book and why one would write a book and why now. And I guess the other reason too is, when you get older, you think, well, who knows, you could pop at any time. And you might as well put down some of the things that happened. It was good fun, Yeah. And the idea of doing it with songs, I thought would be much more interesting than just chapters, because it's really what people would be interested in. They don't really want to hear, a few chapters about Durham or something like that,
How did you narrow down the songs that you wanted to include in the book?
Well, it's funny you should ask me that, because somebody said to me the other day, you always seem to be having a problem getting the track right. And I said, well, the reality of it is that I am talking about some of the biggest tracks, and the biggest tracks have always got stories attached to them. There's always problems when you're making them, And so I guess I chose the ones that had good stories in them, rather than, what could you say? We all got together, somebody played this, and everything turned out fine. I mean, it does happen sometimes. You get it. We used to call those freebies, where suddenly something goes right for a day. You're working with a track and it's nearly done. It's like a freebie. Wow, and back to the grind.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose when you're producing other people, there are so many variables involved in anything you take on. You've got everyone involved in writing the song, everyone in the band, everyone in the studio, and the engineers, and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of, and we haven't even mentioned the record companies, etc. So there's a lot of different variables going on there. And as you say, that if you pull one chord out of that, the whole thing can unravel fairly quickly. How do you manage to keep these things together, or is it just luck of the draw?
Well, if you think about it and you read the book, I didn't work with many groups because, it's normally engineer producers that work with rock bands, for instance. But, I worked with Yes because I was a really huge fan of Yes. So I didn't, ABC were kind of only 5 people, and they were more or less there all the time in the studio. Some artists aren't. You start something off with them, and then they go off, and then they come back. When you've got it all sorted out. It varies with the person you're working with. I mean, if you get a track with Rod Stewart, for instance, Rod has got no interest in coming into the studio while you're doing the track, right? No interest, right? What he wants you to do is to turn up with a track that he likes to sing over. So it's that's one person, but other people can be jumpy and they're scared that you might do something, When I was doing the last album with the Pet Shop Boys, they used to come in every morning and insist on hearing the mix where I left it the night before. And sometimes they'd be saying, Trevor, You stayed up too late, and this has got to come off, and that's got to come off.
True.
You mentioned Yes as well, which must have been quite a formidable prospect, surely, to work with Yes, especially if you were a fan of the band already.
Yeah, well, it was, but I mean, I was, I sort of joined as the singer in late 1979,
Yeah.
or early 1980, and that was pretty scary.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, because they're incredibly technically competent as a band, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're all really good players. But we made an album together, a drama album. But the funny thing is, within sort of a week and a half of joining, I realised that singers only get to do their bits. Everybody else got sorted out before the singer because it was only ever a guide vocal
Oh, yeah.
until you came to do the singing. So there was loads of downtime. So of course I ended up producing just like I normally did. When they were playing the opening track, it had like a 6-minute intro that was completely instrumental that they were playing live. I remember I gave them marks out of 10. And I said we have to get to an 8 out of 10 before I'll accept it. So for every bit of the opening, it was a track called Machine Messiah. Every bit had to be 8 out of 10, but it was good fun. It was fun working together,
Yeah.
That's why I put up with them, because I like them so much.
Excellent. Well, if you're going to walk into a band, you might as well walk into one with a lot of chops.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, you went on to produce a number of albums with them, and a huge single success as well, which they hadn't really had before.
Well, what's kind of ironic is that 90125 is Yes's biggest album. And yet, I think I say in the book that I don't think it's the best one. I for me, Close to the Edge or Relay, maybe Fragile, and the Yes album are my favourite Yes albums. But I do like 90125. I do think it's a good record. I think, I mean, it was surprising to get such a big hit single with Yes. But that's the reason I agreed to do it the second time, to produce them. I wasn't the singer the second time. I produced it, and it was really on condition that they did Under a Lonely Heart.
Well, good conditions, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, Did you just kind of naturally drift into production then, or because you said you sit around up with a lot of time in your hands in between takes and waiting for your vocals to come on? Did you just drift into it, or was it something that you'd already had your eye on and you wanted to get involved with?
I didn't drift into it at all. I wanted to, but I built a recording studio in Leicester, and with some friends in about 1975. With the money I'd made from playing with the Ray McVeigh band, and we got one of the first customers we got was a man who wanted to make a record with Leicester City football team, and so I made the record. I got the musicians, I fixed the song up and whatever, and it came out on Decca. It didn't do anything, but afterwards a guy said to me, a guy called actually. Anyway, Coleman said to me, what you did with that Leicester record is being a record producer. And I said, what do you mean? I got it together. He said, but that's what producers do. You acted like a producer. He said, you got the musicians, right? And I said, yeah, and you fixed the song up. And I said, well, the song was written. I didn't write it. And he said, no, but I fixed it up. He said, yeah, all the chords are wrong, So from that moment on, really, I Bill Coleman, that was his name, I realised that's what I wanted to do. But it took me from there, it took me about 5 years. And before Video Killed the Radio Star, I did loads of demos for people. The year before Video was a hit, I had I used to have a diary for that year, and I'd produced 48 songs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
For various people. So I'd done a lot of work. Video Killed the Radio Star was the result of Jeffrey and I really spending a lot of time in the studio and learning how to, gags, like how to get things to sound good, learning all the stuff that they don't teach you in books. So I didn't just drift into it.
During those 5 years, were you? Did you have conviction that you were going to have a huge pop hit, or were you just working away, thinking I'm going to hone my craft and just kind of enjoying yourself, or did you kind of have your eye on, the big time and having a really big chart hit?
Well, the music business isn't fun unless you're in the big time. Otherwise, it's a bit of a dreary drudge.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to get a hit, but I knew it was. I was under no illusion. I mean, the first thing I ever produced, I produced for some friends of mine. I thought it was the best thing in the world, and I thought it was definitely going to be a hit, and it wasn't. And from that moment, it took me about 5 years. I realized that there was a lot to learn, and so I just kept trying to learn stuff. Every time I did a demo, I would. When I got in the studio, I'd get the engineer to do different things. Engineers used to hate me. I was always coming up with terrible ideas that they didn't want to do. So, it definitely wasn't a drift. I was pretty. I could see that, my parents wanted me to give up. They wanted me to. They want me to go and train as a school teacher. Because I was always good at maths and English. They wanted me to go and go to teachers training, but I was like, no, I'm not. I'm sure it's going to work.
Yeah.
An old guy that I used to work for on Denmark Street, a guy called Stuart Reed, he said to me, you know what the music business is like? He said, you slog away and it looks hopeless. And then one morning you wake up and you're in business. And boy, was he right. I slogged away for years, and then one morning I woke up, and I was in business.
Yeah, yeah. And were your parents convinced after that?
Well, it wasn't a question of whether my parents were convinced. It was just my father-in-law certainly wasn't. My late wife's father, who I love dearly, one Friday night, I'll never forget, he said to me, "How's the record doing, Trevor?" And I said, "It's number one, Mr. Sinclair." He said, well, one swallow doesn't make a summer.
He sounds like my parents.
But that was very early on before we were married.
Yeah.
He said that. He was worried for his daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
And reassured, presumably, that there were many swallows after that one.
You did take some big risks as well, though. I mean, setting up a studio is a risk in itself, but you also invested in the Fairlight when it was, the cost of a car or a small house. And certainly when Frankie Goes to Hollywood came around, I mean, you really put all your faith in what you were doing because you spent such an amount of time making those singles as great as they were. I mean, you must have quite a sort of a deep confidence in your own abilities to really lean into the things you've done.
Well, it was something like relax. I was in a position where the band, I couldn't just walk away. The band was signed to my label.
Right.
But it's certainly... So I had to get it right. There was no alternative. And if it wasn't right, I couldn't pretend that it was right. But you are right. Until that record was a success, it was all our own money and effort and time that we were putting in. I knew there was something in Relax. I don't know. I don't often get that conviction like that, but I knew there was something in it. Part of it was Holly's voice. The way he sang it was so full on, But yeah, I did. I must have had confidence. I never thought about it really. I just thought, I've got to get this thing right. What do I have to do?
I mean, you take songs like the Frankie Goes to Hollywood ones, and I've heard the demos of those, and I saw them on the Tube when they first appeared. And they were great little songs, and there was a lot to recommend it, and they were certainly an interesting bunch of people. But the finished product was really, I mean, it's huge and groundbreaking and just amazing. And all of those remixes were, a massive part of my youth. And anyone who's my age will remember the sheer fuss of all of that. But the productions were so, I don't know. They were like architectural. I mean, when you approach a song like that, do you have a clear vision in your head of what that sound is going to be like, or are you led very much by what you find in the recordings? Because I mean, you actually did re-record a lot of the stuff yourself, didn't you?
Sometimes I would re-record things myself. This is something people ask me fairly frequently, and the thing is, music's so volatile. It's so mercurial that you might have one thing I learned early on was that whatever vision I had for a record, if something really great comes along, go with it, right? Don't stick to some idea that isn't working, you know? And sometimes trying to do this, you come up with that, you know? And that's really good. Relax really went, you know, the way that the Frankies originally played it was all based on a blues scale, you know? It was just that thing, you know, dang, 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 relax, dang, dang, dang. And I think what was amazing was that when we started the version that became the record, we'd been playing with it a bit in the rehearsal room, but because Frankie were a band, it had never occurred to me that I could just do it without them there, to be honest. Right? I didn't, you know, I hadn't got to that point really. But when we decided, you know, it certainly wasn't working the way we were trying to get it, and we went back and we started on that idea, you know, the eights on the piano. It was something that JJ had showed me, and I said, great, that's really good, the eights. Suddenly realized, God, those eights will fit all the way under relax. And then, you know, the drum machine parts, and then I said, why don't we, instead of this awful American blues scale, why don't we go European? Let's put it in a minor key, you know, and you know, you go from, I mean, a blues scale is a minor, really. It's a flattened third, you know. But when you play the minor, it suddenly changes and it becomes more European, more sort of world-like, you know. And we were lucky; it just suddenly took off. We knew it was good when we were working on it, you know. And we more or less did it in a day, vocal, everything, you know. I tweaked it a bit a couple of days later, but that was pretty much it. Because back in those days, you couldn't synchronize anything back to tape. You record your track to tape, and that was it. And so we were running a drum machine, Fairlight, and a guitar at the same time, with, you know, JJ playing on top of, you know, the sequence. It was a trip. And one of the great things about a Linn drum machine was that you could change it on the fly. So you could sort of, you know, you could get going. You could do it live, which is how I did it. I just changed the patterns on the fly. But, you know, we rehearsed it for 4 hours, I think, you know, and then we got it first take.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Shall we dig into your phonographic memories? Because you've given us three tracks to help tell the story of your life or your career. The first one you've given us is a track by the Yardbirds. Can you talk to us about this one?
Well, this was, if I'm right, this would be 65 or 66, this track.
Happenings 10 years time ago, that one.
And it was, Yardbirds had a little bit of a stream of hits with, you know, Shape of Things and For Your Love. And I was really into the Yardbirds. And at this point, when I bought Happenings 10 years time ago, I had the single. I just literally moved to Leicester. And there was something about the guitar solo and people talking in the distance that really, because it's Jeff Beck, that really sort of caught my imagination. And so I used to listen to it a lot, and it reminds me, if I hear it, it reminds me of being 16 and being in Leicester in a strange town after I just moved from Durham. I lived all my life in Durham and I had no friends in Leicester.
it's quite a psychedelic period. That I mean that. As someone who's coming up, whose destiny is to go on and produce things, it was a period where the band had another instrument in the studio for the first time. Really, you think about the Beatles and when they started, and it was just get together in the room and bang it out, and then by the end it was like 9 months of tweaking and re-recording and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I mean that era must have had quite an effect on how you looked at music and how it was made.
Well, it may have been psychedelic, and I kind of got that psychedelic thing. I was a little bit bemused by it because I was only 15 or 16. I'd never taken a drug apart from alcohol in my life, and but I was aware that the Beatles were up to some funny stuff, with the outfits. But it was such good fun. I didn't sort of question it too much. But you're right. It's a very psychedelic record, and it was around the same time as Hendrix first broke through. And if you think about it, they used to make very psychedelic videos of him. He was very good for that kind of thing.
In terms of the context of you hearing and enjoying this record, like it sounds like you associate it with a feeling of isolation and sort of loneliness. I mean, did getting into that type of music help you find your tribe after you moved?
Well, no, because this was just one record of quite a few that I was pretty obsessed with at the time. Like I think Like a Rolling Stone came out around about then too. And I had a guitar, and what I used to do was I worked up an act, with the harmonica on a thing. I could still do it, bits of it. And I learned every single Bob Dylan song.
Wow.
That he had out up to that point. So that's what I used to spend my time doing. I can still remember, half the lyrics for Desolation Row or something like that.
Those lyrics are incredibly complicated. I mean, that's not like She Loves You, yeah. That's some proper poetry.
Oh, I mean, Gates of Eden.
Yeah.
Of War and Peace, the truth just twists its curfewed gullets, it glides. Between four-legged forest clouds, the cowboy angel rides.
Yeah.
There you
Candle
go.
lit into the sun, though its glow may be waxed or black, all except beneath the gates of Eden. I used to know all the verses.
Yeah.
I don't remember them now.
Well, were you always listening to lots of different types of music, though? You were never, you didn't specialise, as it were.
Well, I like pop music. I didn't like, I didn't like trad jazz or anything like that. Although I used to do loads of trad jazz gigs in my early 20s, because in London there were lots of those sort of gigs around.
Were you doing them through gritted teeth, seeing as you didn't like it?
No. Playing anything properly is always good fun. And trad, trad's one of those things. Most of the time you're either going plunk plunk or plunk 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 plunk. Or, you know what I mean? But it's knowing all the chords.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite.
But I used to, I knew most of the chords for all the old trad things. So.
In terms of musical styles, your second choice is what I would call a proper rocker in the American Woman, Guess Who. I mean, a friend of mine played this out rather randomly just a couple of weeks ago in a big sort of a brewery in London. And it really sounds amazing and got the whole crowd going again. And I'm sure nearly everyone in that room was far too young to remember it first time round. Tell us about why you chose this one.
Well, I chose this. This is a funny one because for two reasons. The first reason, I when I was living in London, I think it would have been 1970, late 69 or 70. I think I came to London. My sister had this record, and I really liked it. And I used to listen to it a lot. American Woman, that away from me. Yeah, I remember, and you're right, it was a really beefy sounding record. But then they sort of turned it into Bachman Turner Overdrive, the Guess Who, I think a few members. And then much later, when I was working with Malcom Mclaren, I bumped into Africa Bambaataa, and Malcolm introduced us. And I remember shouting in his ear, "Who's your favourite band?" And he went, "The Guess Who."
Wow.
And I said, "What? The Guess Who?" Knowing exactly who they were.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh man, I've got a live album and there's some great drum breaks on it. The drum sounds fucking amazing, you know." That was my other memory attached to it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Africa Bambaataa liked the Guess Who.
Who'd have known? I didn't even realise
Yeah.
they were that good for drum breaks. I must go and investigate that.
American woman, stay away from me. American woman, mama, let me be. Don't come hanging around my door. I don't want to see your face no more. I got more important things to do than spend my time growing old with you. Now, woman, I said stay away. American woman, listen what I say.
I'd say I didn't realise that you'd worked on Duck Rock either, which is another really
produced Duck
really
Rock.
classic album that's well ahead of its time.
Yeah.
When you approached that, I mean, the sounds on there were really different to what was going on at the time, and the whole notion of having all the little vocal snippets and kind of samples of radio conversations and stuff. I mean, how did that all come about? Was there where was that being led from? Who was driving that? Was that Malcom Mclaren, or was that?
Malcom Mclaren had a tape of the world's famous Supreme Team show. They used to rent a half an hour of radio time in New York at 4 a.m. and like twice a week, and they put on a show and people would call them up. Malcolm told me the show was really for them to get women, basically. But they also, and you can hear them on the radio. Hey, just like a superstar, you know.
Yeah.
But
Little she.
It was, yeah, little she. Yeah. So I had that tape, and I had a tape of their show, and there was all that stuff on it, and that was the first time I ever heard anybody scratching records. You know, I was
Yeah.
pretty knocked out with the record scratching because it seemed to me it was the same thing as the Fairlight, only kind of analog. But I'll tell you a funny thing that happened. You know, on the end of Buffalo Girls, there's a little voice where she says, "Too much of that Snow White."
I love that. Yeah.
And it's actually in reply to a question from Just Like a Superstar, I think, where he says, "Hey, how come you're still up?" And she said, "Too much of that Snow White."
Yeah.
And I heard that at the end of Buffalo Girls. And then suddenly it was on the BBC and it was being played and everything. And I started to get a bit paranoid that I was going to get into trouble because because of that bit at the end. And one day I was down at Sam East, and the receptionist came in and said, "Trevor, it's the controller of the BBC on the phone." And I thought, oh my God, no, what I've been dreading. And so I take the call, and it's the controller of the BBC, but it was just to tell me that I'd won the DJ's award for that year. I never mentioned it.
In spite of that little Snow White, there must be a list somewhere of all the secret drug references that managed to make it onto the BBC without anyone knowing.
I think the nice couplet to this, of course, is that with the Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax and Two Tribes videos, etc., you certainly upset the BBC later on, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'm very fond of the BBC. I love the BBC. It's one
Oh,
of the great
yeah, me
things
too.
about living in Britain.
Shall we get to your third phonographic memory then? Mother Dear, Barclay James Harvest. What can you tell us about this one?
This is a song that I used to perform in my stage act when I was sort of 18, and I was 19, maybe a little bit older, and I was in Denmark. I don't know, I just loved this song because it's somebody sort of seeing a prophecy of their own death, and there's something quite sort of sad and haunting about it. I guess that's why I liked it. This one always reminds me of that time, and it was a strange time because I spent a little bit of time living in Christiania.
That was an amazing place. Because that was, for the listeners, it was like a free state, like almost like a traveller's enclave. Like it was like the new age travellers used to have, where they build themselves a little area. But that was basically a free state in
Copenhagen. I was in a band, And the band was being funded basically by a guy who was smuggling hash out of Kabul. He advertised. We only found that out about 4 weeks in. He advertised for musicians, put a band together, flew us out to Denmark, and then put us up in Christiania. I mean,
Mental.
it was a wild place because it was officially there was no power, but the guy who was sort of running the building that I was in had dug a hole in the ground, and he just hooked into the mains.
No way.
So it was a pretty interesting time of my life, and I enjoyed certain aspects of it. And I used to play this song sometimes when I used to do a few songs with just it was very much people would play a lot of music, you know.
Mother dear, what a night this has been. I awoke in the light of a vision in white. The prettiest girl that I have ever seen. Lately my love said the lady in white I have watched from afar, but love draws me near. Now take my hand, hold tight, mother dear. Do you know what this could mean, oh mother dear?
You must have been quite a sort of free-spirited, confident young person in order to just go off and have an adventure like that so young.
Others might say an idiot.
Fearless, I would say.
Yeah, fearless.
I never thought about it back then, you know. I come from the northeast. I spent a lot of my early life ducking gangs of Teds who wanted to beat the crap out of me.
Wow, yeah, yeah.
Because I had glasses and I was brainy. You're brainy. Is our brainy?
Brainy.
How we here, we're going to brain you, you know?
Wow.
That kind of stuff. I used to get a fair amount of that. Brains.
Did you feel that in that case that you were sort of did you feel as though you kind of had to go out in the world and look for something else, like some place where you might fit in?
I don't know if I was looking to fit in any time. I didn't care about fitting in. When I used to walk to school and, you know, I used to see the trains, I used to think, I'm going to be on that train one day getting out of here.
Yeah.
You know, I want to go to the places that I read about in the newspapers.
Yeah.
What was it like fulfilling that little prophecy, that wish for yourself? Because, you know, Leicester's a long way from Durham, but, you know, you ended up in LA and all sorts. So, you know, I guess it's a stepped set of experiences. But when did you feel you were really, you know, getting out of the small town mentality and finding your way into the big time?
Well, it's funny, we were just talking about this at lunch. I came to London when I was 21. I mean, I came to London before that, but only for a day, you know, I mean, that kind of thing. But I actually moved to London when I was 21. And I lived in a Earl's Court in a house full of bedsits, you know. And there were Turkish people, French people, Canadian people, Pakistani people, all kinds of people. And it was very new to me. I'd never met people from outside the country before, you know, and it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed, you know, looking back. I can't, you know, everyone was so friendly, you know, when you're all just starting out. It's probably like university. I never went to university, but I can imagine university is a bit like that. So, you know, in the world and being, you know, I wanted to be a musician, and being a musician takes you all over the place, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't, yeah, and one of the good things when you're a musician is that you're working when everybody's off, and you're off when everybody else is working. So you get the place to yourself, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Eamon, you had a question about the Fairlight that we were talking about before Trevor came on the line. You must ask this question.
Yeah. So we were just idly talking before you came online, and we know that Kate Bush had one of the 4 Fairlights that came into England, and we talked to Nigel Planer, and his record producer brother had one of them, and now it turns out you have one of them. So there was supposed to be 4 in the country. We're wondering who had the other Fairlight.
Jeffrey Downs.
Oh, he knew as well. That's amazing. If anyone in the country is going to know, it's going to be this guy.
Yeah. Thanks for solving that mystery for us.
Jeff Downs and Peter Gabriel.
Oh.
Yes. So there you go. That must have been such a game changer. I mean, you obviously knew or saw the potential in that, really early on, because it's very sharp end technology for the time. B, it was a big investment. I mean, you had to really want that and go for it. I mean, did you have a big plan for sampling? Was that the main thing? Do you think I could do things that I just couldn't do before? What made you take that big bet?
I'd seen it with Jeffrey. I'd seen what it was capable of, and I understood what it did. And I said to Jill, I need one of these because I need one. And, it was a lot of money, but I'd made a lot of money from Video Killed the Radio Star. And what else am I going to invest in apart from myself?
Yeah.
And when it arrived, it was beautiful. I set it up. I plugged all the wires in, like it said in the manual. And then I loaded up the one page, and the first sound I heard on it was Orc Stab. I thought, wow, I can use that. Well, there's a good start. But then the manual got incredibly technical, so I thought, this is not going to work. There's no way I can get into this. Drum machine's about my limit. And that's when I did one of the few clever things I ever did, which was give it to JJ and Charlick, JJ, and basically did a deal with him, and he worked on it all the time. And I would pay him for the days where he came into the studio, and that's how I got all that brilliant stuff, really. It was, I'd give JJ an idea. We're going to do Teresa Bazaar's backing vocals. So she's got to sing la, 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 la. Do you think you can get a la in? And, and we'd make the samples and give them to JJ, and he'd disappear for days and come back and say, check this out. We have la, 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 fantastic. So that's the way I worked it, because it was it was somebody's job, that thing. It was so complicated.
Wow. And of course that basically allowed the art of noise to come into life, and what a fantastic groundbreaking bit of work that was. I mean, mostly instrumental, loads of samples, break beats from hip hop. That was like it landed from another world when that came out. I mean, how was it to work on?
See, what we used to do, we'd be working on Malcom Mclaren, one of the big things on the Art of Noise came from Yes. The drum loop on Beatbox was Alan White. There was a track from the Yes album that didn't work called Red Light, Green Light. It was a great sound, and JJ looped it in the Fairlight. It was the first time I ever heard a digital drum loop, and we were knocked out with it. And so we would start doing things. When the main session finished, JJ had a Skull and Crossbones, and he used to say, "Hodge the Jolly Roger," on somebody's track. And we'd start messing around, and we'd record everything, just do daft things. And the sort of daft things turned into the Art of Noise. I had all of that stuff, and I had things like Beatbox. And when I brought Paul Morley into ZTT and played it to him, he loved it, of course. And he came back with the name The Art of Noise. And he came up with this idea, sampling the 20th century, 21st century. And it sort of took off from there. I remember Anne saying to me, I just did an interview where people think I'm all artistic and everything, and I'm not. And I said, not really, we were just messing around. And I said, but Anne, that's being artistic.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Were you surprised at the sudden success of that? We did speak to Anne Dudley earlier on in the podcast, and she was more than delighted with waking up to a number one, but very surprised.
I wasn't surprised at how enthusiastically the first Art of Noise thing was taken, because I knew the scene in New York, because I'd been there with Malcom Mclaren, and I thought they're going to love this in New York, which they did, So no, I wasn't too surprised. I was pleased that we managed to get a hit with Close to the Edit and then Moments in Love. And I still think Moments in Love is probably one of the best tracks we ever did. And Anne had a lot to do with that,
Yeah, I mean, it still gets played. It's still getting remixed on the regular in the club scenes. Every other year, a version comes out. I've got dubstep versions and jungle versions and techno versions and all sorts. So there is something timeless about that. When you've done something, is it obvious to you whether it's going to fly, whether it's going to have that kind of longevity, whether it's going to be that hit, or sometimes you finish and just think, oof, I don't know what's going to go on.
Well, when you finish something and you know it's good, then you kind of forget about it and hope that everything's going to be okay. Like for instance, when I finished All the Things She Said, I didn't hear anything for ages, and I forgot about it. I knew it was good. Somebody said to me, I remember somebody said, "Do you think it's good?" And I said, "Yeah, it's good. If you get through the first chorus, you really enjoy it. It really picks up in the second verse, and it's good." And then they called me out the blue and said, "It's coming in at number 1." I couldn't believe it. So that's good. That's nice when you hear that.
Yeah.
Same thing with Fight the Moonlight. Didn't hear anything for ages, and then he called me up and said, "It's coming in at number 1."
Yeah.
Great.
Fantastic.
That magic touch.
Yeah.
Trevor Horn, it's been such a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you about all these amazing records and your phonographic memories as well. It's been great, and congratulations as well on the book Adventures in Modern Recording, which is basically it's kind of a almost like a deeper continuation of this conversation, really. So like I say, the format of the podcast feels fitting, but thank you so much for speaking to us. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you so much for all that wonderful music that we grew up with and still love so much. So it's I think you comprise about 10% of my record collection.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Bye-bye.
Dear listener, I do hope you enjoyed listening to the fabulous Trevor Horn tell us all about his phonographic memories. And we always love to have you along on our little journeys. And we don't ask very much, we don't ask for money, we don't ask for cake. What we ask for is fame. So please, just tell a friend, spread the word, let's grow this pod organically like a fantastic watermelon. We love you forever. And special thanks to Tom Colvin for cleaning up the audio on this week's podcast. So we did have a horrible few moments where we were trying to tell one of the world's greatest producers to adjust his microphone levels. Not a good look.
Get away from me.